Welcome back to Transit Tangents. My name's Lewis,
I'm Chris.
and today we are going to be diving into all things micromobility, whether that be scooters.
I was going to say, Lewis, what is micromobility?
That's a great question. What is micromobility? There's an official definition, but the less official definition is small devices that get you around fairly quickly. Usually they're electric, something like that. Yeah.
Small devices that can get you from point A to point B, like personalized transportation.
Gotcha. So some of the examples we'll talk about today: scooters, bike share, whether that be like the kind of dockable bikes that you've seen in cities, the ones that are kind of just strewn about. We'll get into the details and the differences between all of those. Lots to talk about there. They're very controversial. Some cities have banned some of these modes of transportation. Before we jump into all that, though, we've been very excited about all of the feedback we've been getting from everybody. The amount of people actually listening and watching this has gone up quite a bit. We blew past 1,000 streams of the podcast. We might even be at 2 now, if I'm being honest. But
yeah, it's pretty high.
Yeah, so thank you all so much for watching and listening.
Watching, listening, subscribing, rating, commenting.
Yes.
Speaking of comments, I think you have a couple to read off today.
Yes, and we're going to definitely read off some comments at the end of the episode. And please, like, as we're watching these, or as you're watching these, if you have thoughts, leave a comment. We'll read all of them. It makes a big difference. So, and at the start here, if you have thoughts on micromobility before this episode, let us know. What do you think of scooters? What do you think of bikes, bike shares in the comments below? And then at the end, you can leave another one to see if we've changed your mind on something.
Yeah.
And if you're not subscribed to us, if you're watching on YouTube, please consider hitting the subscribe button. If you haven't rated us on your favorite podcast platform that you might be listening on, consider doing that.
Also, comments aren't just for watchers. If you are listening on any of the podcast platforms and you'd like to leave a comment, some of the podcast platforms allow that. Or just go to transittangents.com. You'll see a contact form and you can tell us whatever you want. Tell us your favorite transit stories. Tell us we're doing a great job. Give us feedback like we're doing a great job. And and whatever else you want to type in there.
Yes. So with all of that aside now, let's jump into the micromobility episode. So first off, I think we want to start off with a bit of a history of how this has all kind of come to take over our cities.
It has been, I've gone down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out where these community transportation systems have started. As anybody who's listening or watching has probably seen, in the most recent 6 years, almost every North American city has been invaded by these dockless scooter programs, which, you know, on paper sound great, but then in theory, or then in reality, you just see scooters strewn about the streets. You're walking over them. It causes some problems. In addition to that, you also see dockless bike systems. Similar thing. They're kind of everywhere. But then you see the other side of it, which is a little more organized, like our dockable bike sharing programs. And we're going to get into sort of all of these things.
Initially, though, when we looked this up, a really fun thing was scooters that look just like the dockless scooters, the bird scooters, lime scooters, whatever ones you might have in your city if they're not banned there. They look crazy similar. For those of you watching, we'll put up an image here so you can see it. For those of you listening, you're gonna have to take our word for it. Imagine just like a slightly older looking version of these scooters, and like Chris found some fun photos.
Yeah, if you had to guess the first year, well, you already know this, but before today, if you had to guess when the first sort of motorized scooter came out, what would have been your thought?
I mean, it would have been recent. My guess would have been maybe like the 80s or something at the earliest.
Same.
You know,
I was shocked when I started doing some research and found that the earliest motorized scooters were produced in 1915 in New York.
And they look wildly similar.
They look the exact same. Like we have not reinvented the wheel.
Right.
It is the same little platform with the 2 wheels. It even has like the long handlebar.
Yes.
The only difference is like instead of having little throttles, you had to like move the handlebar kind of back and forth to engage the clutch and like keep it moving.
Yeah.
But these things are wild, and you see people in like the big dresses or like a top hat riding these things through New York. It looks like ChatGPT created images of people riding these things, but they were dangerous. They went 35 miles an hour. This is before you had all roads being like smoothly paved, which arguably we don't have that today. But
Right.
roads were way worse. There was still like horse traffic on the streets, and you're zooming by at 35 miles an hour on this thing.
There's like different levels of conflict in that era. Right now, it's like scooters, bikes, and cars. Then
Yeah.
it was scooters, bikes, and horses.
Exactly. Yeah. And so you're just like zooming past these people. Safety gear is not a thing, really, in 1915. It's just wild. And they were in production from 1915 to 1922. They stopped production in the U.S. a little bit before they stopped production in Germany. And there's only a handful of these things left today. One of them, I think, is sitting in the Smithsonian.
Right. Which, if you're, yeah, I'd love to see it. Honestly, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
I couldn't get over that, seeing that time frame that scooters were a thing. Kind of fast forward a little bit in time was kind of the beginning of any sort of sharing program for bikes or scooters. We saw a couple cities. I believe the first was Amsterdam, to launch a bike share program of some
Yeah,
sort.
if we're talking about if we're talking sort of community transportation sharing, well after the scooters were invented, there was an experiment in Amsterdam by this anarchist group called Provo, and their goal was to put, I think, 100 bikes on the street and have them available to anybody. They painted the bikes white and just left them around the city, and within about, I don't know, a week or so, all the bikes were either stolen or thrown in the canal.
Yep.
So kind of a wild story.
It is such a like a romantic idea though, that like there could just be bikes. I understand the desire for that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like to
Yeah.
be able to get off the train or walk out your front door, and it's like I just need to go a little bit. There's this shared bike right here. I can get on it, leave the bike outside of the business, and then walk to my next destination or whatever, and have them everywhere. But unfortunately, people have the tendency to to not want nice things. I don't know. It's just people are gonna people, whatever that means.
People are absolutely, people are going to people, and that is a theme that you're going to see over and over and over again in the history of these systems.
Yep. So yeah, that was kind of the first one, and there were some similar systems that happened in quite a few different places where there are these just kind of like strewn about, no organization, no docks or anything like that.
We saw it again in Portland.
Yep.
There was the Yellow Bike program in Portland where they put out dockless bikes all over the city. And again, same thing. They didn't last very long. The bikes were very quickly vandalized or stolen. So it was too costly to continue to replace these bikes.
Right.
And what's actually cool about the Yellow Bike program is that that organization still exists in Portland. They have just now transitioned to helping people get to bikes, like basically like helping people who may be disadvantaged in purchasing or having a bike to commute.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's like a nationwide thing in a lot of places. We have a yellow bike here in Austin.
We do.
Are they associated? Are we sure? We'll
find out.
have to find out.
We'll find out
have
if
it
they're
in the
associated.
description.
So
Yeah. And
So-
you have some firsthand experience with a similar system to this. I actually have not heard this story yet. It's been teased to me multiple times, so I'm going to be hearing it for the first time also.
So I do have some experience with it, and again, this is an example of we don't learn from history.
Correct.
And again, people are going to people. So in 2011, I was at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, and I was part of the student government. And we had this extra money in our fund. We got to, as a student government, we got to vote on the programs we got to use this money for. And one of the programs we chose to fund was a bike share program on campus. And at the time, I remember big debates about, oh, well, how do we track them? You have to check them out from like the library, or you have a docking system, and all of that was too costly. So we just said, you know what? Let's just put them all over campus, no locks, no checkout system, and then people can just use them, and they'll like naturally distribute themselves in this perfect way around campus, which again, sounds like on paper sounds great.
Right. It's like the ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was this whole big grand opening sort of thing. The president of the university and all the VPs got on the bikes. The news came out. The marching band came out.
Wow.
We had this big bike ride down the main drag of the university, and that's also when I discovered that The bikes didn't have gears, and they also didn't have brakes.
But they didn't have brakes?
You had to you had to backpedal to brake.
Whoa,
And
okay.
I did not realize this.
Oh
So
my,
I get on the bike and I'm like going down a little hill right behind the whole procession and can't stop.
oh my
And
god.
ended up veering off into the curb, like into some
Did other people
into
figure
some
out how to
azalea
stop?
bushes.
That's hilarious. Oh
Other
my
people
god.
knew, and I didn't
Wow.
know. And they're like,
Wow.
"Have you
I
never had
haven't
a
seen a
bike like
bike with
this?"
brakes like that since I was a kid. Like that's how they used to be when I was a kid. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't think I'd ridden one since I was
Wow.
4.
Wow.
But
That's hilarious.
so we launched this big bike share program, and I got to use it a couple times in between classes, and it was really convenient.
Yeah.
But within maybe 3 months, almost the entire fleet of 500 bikes had gone in for repairs,
Wow.
had disappeared, had been
500
vandalized.
bikes. That's not a small.
No, it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
small. We
Yeah.
did, at the time, the campus was 15,001 students. They were very
Wow.
proud of the N one.
15,001.
But we had 500 bikes on campus, and yeah, almost all of them either disappeared or were damaged. There was a Facebook group that got created called "Where's This Jag Bike?" We were the Jaguars. It was like, "Where's this Jag Bike?" And the Jag Bike would like be in a tree or at a bar downtown or in a dorm room or in New Orleans. Like they were everywhere. So
That's amazing. That's wow. That story was worth the wait for me. I'm kind of glad I didn't know it until now.
I would say I was actually having a conversation with a friend about this last night. I was trying to figure out who came up with the bike share program, and I tracked down all of these people I used to work with at the campus to try to figure it out. And the one person that the news credited with creating the program, I talked to her and she's like, "It was not my idea. I had nothing to do with this."
Well, I think at this point she probably might be trying to distance herself from the idea.
I know.
I don't know.
But I mentioned to all
Wow.
of them, like, wow, what a big failure. And somebody, one of my very good friends, Paige, she pushed back on that. She goes, "I don't think it was a failure because I think it created a need for bikes and more people started bringing their bikes
That's
to campus."
probably a yeah.
Yeah, and then now today, Lime services the campus.
There you go.
So there we go. We created the legacy of
circle.
it, and despite all of the bikes being stolen, which is the recurring theme,
Yeah.
it seemed to be a success in the long run.
Well, and I think you mentioning Lime there is a good kind of segue into the next phase of this. We've now heard about several just kind of we'll call them like more free flowing bike share programs where there is like zero accountability essentially to the user.
Yeah.
It's fully just honor system to the max, to the extreme. Uh, then kind of led to the advent of the dockable systems.
Yep.
The first ones appearing in 1995 in the UK.
1995, University of Portsmouth, Portsmouth College, Portsmouth University, one of those.
Yes.
But in Portsmouth in the UK, yeah, 1995, they created a program that used a card to unlock the bikes. It had a dockable system. And you got a really heavy fine if you didn't return the bike. So they did incentivize returning it. They did start to learn from their mistakes at that point.
And those are like pretty popular in a lot of cities now. The most like I don't know that this is the most used, but in New York City, city bikes are everywhere. Here in Austin, we have our own version of it. It's Metro Bike.
B-Cycle,
Yeah,
Metro Bike.
B-Cycle. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going through some changes at the moment. But most cities have these sort of dockable systems.
And what's actually really cool about those dockable systems, it was introduced in North America in Montreal. The city of Montreal had this big sort of idea gathering initiative about how to improve mobility in the city. And people came up with the idea of this dockable bike system. Again, not a new idea,
Right.
but they wanted to create a more efficient way to dock the bikes and move them around the city. So Montreal actually created their own company to manage this bike program, and then began leasing the technology from this program and selling it to other cities. So Boston, New York, DC, all of these big cities that had the first like huge rollouts of their rental bike
using that
systems
company.
were using Montreal's company to do it. And that's where City Bike comes from. That's where
Right.
the DC Metro Share, I think is what it's called.
Right.
So yeah, it's actually really cool that it came out
Right.
of Montreal.
And those systems have seen, I mean, there's still issues with all these systems. Like there will be bikes that will break, go missing and whatnot, but like way more organized in the cities and whatnot. You don't have them kind of strewn about everywhere, as we'll get into in more detail in a second. But that is a much more organized and clear system of like how to use it and whatnot. There's some drawbacks that we'll talk about in a little bit here, but more organized, more accountability to the user. more trackable as far as like where they are and if there are maintenance issues and all of this sort of stuff. And then kind of the last advent, as we kind of go through the history, is the scooter systems. And the first kind of shared scooters that popped up in the US at least were in, I think it was 2017. You had Bird launching in Santa Monica, and they literally just like appeared out of nowhere overnight. The company didn't ask for permission to do it or anything. They just literally dropped scooters at one night in Santa Monica and let people do what they will with them. Obviously, the scooter wave, if you live in an American city, at some point probably came through your city, and in some cases has left your city, depending on the laws that your city councils and whatnot may have passed.
So I was actually
Yeah.
doing some research on the U.S. Department of Transportation's website on Micromobility, and they do show that there was this huge surge after 2017, 2018, 2019, this huge surge of scooters programs all across the U.S. and some bike share programs. COVID killed almost half of the scooter programs in the country.
Wow.
And only now are they really reaching back to their pre-pandemic levels, which I think we also, we talked about this earlier today. Austin is like ground zero for scooters.
Which is wild.
It's insane. There are
sense,
scooters
yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that as well. During COVID, there were only maybe 2 companies, and now we went riding around town yesterday.
Right.
And
to get some of the, if you're watching, to get some of the B-roll that you've seen in this episode, some of it's probably goofy.
yeah. But we were downtown, and there's hundreds of scooters within a block, and there's probably 4 or 5 companies.
Right. We've got Lime, Bird. There's like another green one, Link.
Super Pedestrian.
Super Pedestrian.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
Super Pedestrian.
There are other companies too. When we were in Salt Lake City, we rode a scooter for part of that. Spin is another one. So there's 5 right there. There are definitely more than that. Some of them now, though, financially are still not doing well. I know Bird in particular, at one point it was over $1 billion valuation, and I'm pretty sure they're close to bankrupt at this point. I don't know.
They've all taken some time to reach profitability. I think Lime finally reached it in 2022. So some of the companies are doing well, others not so much. But there was also this flood of competition in the market.
Right.
And we're talking about, in Micromobility, in this shared program, you were talking about transportation means that should be really cheap. It should only take a couple cents to get across a downtown if you're using a scooter. And that may have been the case in 2018.
Right.
That was not the case yesterday.
No. Yeah, we were like, let's just take some scooters around. First off, Chris is officially a member of the Cult of E-Bikes. We e-biked to downtown. We met up on the route on the way, e-biked downtown, and we're like, all right, like for the sake of the episode, let's get the scooters out, ride around downtown a bit. We were talking about the cost of it. I'm pretty sure we both spent over.
I spent almost $10.
And I spent 11, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, we used them for probably 15 minutes.
We went halfway across downtown Austin. Yeah, we were on them for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It was a ridiculous amount to spend.
Yeah.
To just scoot around downtown.
Yeah, the route that we took was hilarious. Like afterwards, it shows you like, here's where you traveled, and it was like a big square. And I was like, oh, was that worth the $11? I don't know.
When it was super cheap and they first came out, I remember being downtown kind of late at night, and my friend Danielle and I went to went to the state capitol, and we had races around the capitol on the scooters.
Yeah, that would be an expensive affair now.
Yeah, you can't do that now.
But yeah, so now that's kind of like where we are now. There are a lot of pros and cons to these that I think we should get into. So, do we want to start with pros of Dockless?
Sure.
And then we'll work our way through.
Sure.
So, yeah, what do you think?
So if I'm thinking of a Dockless program, the pro to me, again, all of this is great on paper, but the pro to me is that it is much more widespread. You can deploy them in areas where there's higher congestion. You can move the Dockless systems to areas where there's going to be events.
Yeah.
So like in Austin, when we have Austin City Limits, which is like the huge music festival.
70,000-ish people a day.
Yeah, you can take the bikes and create an entire parking area and a pickup area. The bikes and the scooters. And you can really deploy them to serve the transit needs of that particular location or event.
Yeah.
So I think that is a huge plus for the program.
I would also say it is like entirely destination to destination.
Yeah.
Like if it's like you're using public transit and then needing to get the last mile, which is like kind of the main argument for the use of a lot of these things, you can get off, get on the scooter, and literally go to the door of the destination you're going, whereas the other systems require you to find a dock somewhere. So
Yeah.
I think those are the two major pluses of, and I hadn't thought of the one that you just mentioned of like you can pick them up and move them somewhere. Those are the pluses. Let's talk about the negatives of these, though, the cons. We saw some of it yesterday, and you've definitely seen this probably somewhere else, is the chaos that we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's basically like no, I mean, there are rules technically of like how you're supposed to park these things and whatnot, but you can park a scooter somewhere and then it falls over and now it's in the middle of a sidewalk, and then another one falls over and it's in the middle of the sidewalk, and it's just like scooters like littered everywhere.
It is absolute chaos on the streets of just seeing scooters all over the place. I've seen them in bushes. I've seen them half buried in the dirt. I've seen them in the lake here in
yeah.
Austin.
Yes.
I've seen them just trashed on the
Yes.
side of the road.
Yeah.
You see them in all states of disrepair, and it really is a visual pollution
Right.
in the city. It makes it look very cluttered. But also the lithium batteries in these things, while are great for quick charging and getting around town, if they are in the lake and they start leaking into
Yeah.
the water supply, that is a major environmental hazard.
Yeah.
In addition to the visual pollution, though, again, I was talking to my friend Paige last night about micromobility, and her brother has cerebral palsy and he's in a wheelchair. Scooters and dockless bikes are such a problem for them getting around Birmingham, Alabama, because these devices are all over the streets, and they have to move them to allow
The wheelchair to
her
get
brother
through,
to get through, and that is a major problem for people who have other types of mobility assistance needed when these devices are clogging up the streets.
Totally. No. And I mean, yeah, like I said, everyone has probably seen that there, and cities try to do things to make it better for folks getting around on a wheelchair, but oftentimes it's not a major priority as it should be. And like there'll be a narrow ramp to get up the sidewalk, and if there's two scooters sitting at the top of it, someone who might be traveling in a wheelchair on their own is going to potentially be stuck there and not being able to get around it, and that's not okay at all. So
The last thought that I had is actually about the scooters and one of the downsides. There was a study done in Austin, actually. 20 injuries per 100,000 rides.
wow.
20 injuries per 100,000. That doesn't sound like a lot when you're saying, oh, it's just 20. When you add that up, that is a lot.
Right.
It is a lot of injuries.
And it doesn't surprise me, having like the first time I've ridden them. I mean, you like go for it the first time usually, I feel like, because you're like, wow, this is awesome. You can go like 15 miles an hour or something. And yeah, I mean, if you're not used, also like people doing them aren't probably used to riding bikes or anything with traffic around. So yeah, it's definitely people going fast, chaotic. They might have been drinking, like all sorts of.
Yeah. But potholes, utility tracks in the street, like there's all of these little obstacles you have to avoid.
Totally.
I know that Austin streets are not always the best, especially in downtown Austin. So I have to be like really conscious as I'm riding around to make sure I don't like veer off into a hole somewhere.
Absolutely. No, it's that's why the study was done here too. But that, as you said earlier on, like Austin really is kind of a ground zero for
There's so many
for scooting.
Yeah.
For scooting.
for scooting.
For scooting. I do want to let's focus specifically on dockable now, because we did a lot on non-dockable. So pros of a dockable bike system. Starting off, obviously, is the opposite of the dockless, is the fact that they are not chaos. They're organized. They're a clear system where you're parking them in a specific place. You're picking them
Harmoniously
up.
integrated into the urban landscape.
Yes, that was beautiful. Couldn't have said it better myself. That pro, though, is also a con in the sense that you cannot get them everywhere, and in cities where they might have some of these stations, it can actually get kind of inconvenient / confusing. You've got to first find a bike station, but then you have to find one near where you are trying to go to return it. And you also need to hope that there are bikes at the station that you're going to, and that there are spaces to park it at the one that you're going to. So
Have you had experience using City Bike in New York?
I've used it in New York once, so that's not like a you know, well, I used it for a day, so it
Yeah.
wasn't like one time. We used it for a whole day to kind of get around, and I didn't have issues with it actually.
Yeah.
We were able to navigate around pretty good. One issue we did have is we thought we were going to be able to find a bike station. We were like in Brooklyn, I think, at this point, and we crossed a line from Queens into Brooklyn somewhere, and we rode almost all the way to our destination. And then we're like, shit, there are no stations to return here. We had to ride back like
Oh
quite a
God.
ways. So, but that is the con. Is like
Yeah.
I didn't live there. I didn't know where where
Right.
the stations were going to be. At the time, this was like 2018. So I probably wasn't as like, oh, I've got the app and all the stuff. Like I had a hard time finding where the stations were. So did have issues with it there. I've used them in Austin a little bit, but it's definitely I'm not like using it to commute or
And there's
anything.
definitely not as many stations in Austin. When you look at New
Totally.
York, there's like over 2,000 in the area.
Mhm.
So the issue I have if I go to New York and I try to use City Bike, the most common issue I have is I can't park it.
Right.
Like I get to a station and
Oh,
there's
and it's
no
full.
parking.
Okay.
Like I look at the map and it says, oh, you have 5 open slots,
And
and
there's
then I get
not.
there and there's none.
See, that's a major issue, and that would be like that would cause me to probably use it less. I know my partner Jerry, his brother-in-law uses. So he lives over in Hoboken, New Jersey. I think it's still City Bike on that side. He uses it to connect to transit to get into New York City every day from his apartment, and he has like a monthly pass. So, and those have a similar rate structure. I would say is like an unlock fee
Yeah.
and then per minute. But there are also like membership
Yeah.
things, and if you are a member, especially of the Dockless or of the dockable ones, it can be very affordable. The Dockless ones are still a little pricey, but
Another
yeah.
pro of the dockable bike systems, you don't necessarily have to have a smartphone to use it. With the dockless systems, you almost always have
to.
to have a smartphone, which already cuts out some people in the population, and
Right.
and I get that subset of the population is shrinking quickly, but not everybody has a smartphone.
Right. And I mean, even like, yeah, obviously you're thinking like smartphones are expensive, so like folks with lower income, but elderly people
Right.
can totally, my grandparents up until recently were riding bikes. I know, my parents are in their 60s, they ride bikes. They use smartphones, but a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
Hopefully, my mom's gonna be like, I know how to use a smartphone. Yeah, so I think that's another good point.
And I'm really grateful that you don't necessarily have a smartphone because I got stranded once
that's right.
in Washington, D.C. I was going to meet a friend who sort of ghosted me.
Oh,
I'm not going to name names. I'm still talking to this friend. But they had something go late and my phone died. And I was stranded in downtown D.C. and I didn't know how to get back. I was staying in Crystal City in Virginia, and I didn't know how to get back there, and I didn't know how to use the buses. Now I feel more comfortable, but I didn't know how to use the buses. The train stopped at midnight, so I had no way to take the train back, and I could not find a taxi anywhere. I even went to Union Station, could not find a taxi.
Yeah.
I ended up wandering around until I got to the mall and found the dockable bike system. And in DC, they have these giant maps that tell you where the stations are and like the radius. And I went station to station. It took me about 2 hours. I went station to station, like checking the map to get from near the Capitol building to Crystal City.
right. Damn. Well, but you were able to do it,
And I made
so
it,
that's
so-
yeah. No, that's a really good point. Yeah, so that's kind of there are a lot of pros and cons to these. I think that the dockable is probably the long-term solution that makes the most sense, assuming cities can build out a big enough network of them so that you're not stressed about, am I going to be able to park it somewhere, so that you're not ending up like I did in a part of town where like there aren't any. I think that long-term should be the goal for these sorts of things.
I do think we can bring order to the chaos of Dockless. We saw this in Salt Lake City. When we tried to park the scooters at the museum,
Yeah.
there's a designated box on the
Right.
ground and there's a geofence around it so that the system knows when you're in the box
Right.
and when you're not.
Right.
So there is a way to organize
Right.
this.
Yeah. So I think a combination of doing things like that and expanding dockable systems is the long term solution. I'm excited here in Austin where we live. Our dock system is about to expand quite a bit. I'm blanking on the number off the top of my head, but I'll make sure I link an article down below. And there's also a survey right now if you're an Austin resident of you can fill out 3 places where you would like to see
Oh, nice.
future
Okay.
dock stations. So I'll put that down there below too. I filled it out a week or so ago.
Right in front of my house.
Yeah. No, but like, so right now it's pretty concentrated in downtown and like a little bit of South Austin. And it doesn't go north of University of Texas at Austin, basically. North of that is kind of a dead zone for dock bikes. But there is great bikeability up there now.
Yeah.
North Austin, as if you watch our last episode with Kelsey, she talks about how North Austin is so much more bikeable.
Yeah.
And it is. I live in North Austin now too, and it's a game changer there. But again, let us know what you thought of that. Did we change your mind on any of this as far as scooters, bikes, dockless, chaos, or dockless, dockable? Definitely let us know if we changed your mind. If you still think the same thing, we definitely want to hear your comments. Speaking of which, we are going to read some. Again, at this episode too, we're very close to 100 subscribers. I know that sounds small, but that is a personal goal of mine. I would like to get us there. That's kind of a big moment. So if you haven't subscribed yet, also please consider doing so.
And
like
share
the video, share the video, share the podcast, rate the podcast, all of the above. I'm going to read a couple comments. We've actually got quite a few on the last, so we're not going to go through all of them necessarily. On the last episode, though, the e-bike episode with Kelsey, somebody said, I remember back in the 90s, it was faster to bike 30 minutes rather than wait for the next bus and pray the bus doesn't miss the next bus depot sync time. Hell, I remember biking faster than the bus going all out, and once I passed the bus, I stopped at the next bus stop to take a break. By hopping on the bus I just passed. I did this all on a regular bike. An electric bike would have decimated the bus. Yes, the electric bike does decimate the bus for the most part. Kelsey told us that's why she basically just uses her e-bike to get everywhere now instead of using the bus. So thank you, Kwamulek. Apologies for butchering your name. This was on the gondola episode, and we actually had a couple comments from this person on the last few. So David Ferris 8782, thank you for all the comments. I'm going to read this one here. So I'm a Utah local. I used to be pro gondola. I ski and rock climb in the different canyons here, and I got stuck in a 4-hour traffic jam during a blizzard trying to get out of Little Cottonwood last year. I think that's when I became pro gondola. I've never heard the stop the gondola argument put together so well. I'm convinced. I would love to take a bus up to the different resorts. The service is just so unreliable. Props to Julia.
Yeah, Julia did a great job.
And that episode too, like, we've been really excited about the response. Like, we got over 500 views on it, like, right away, which was super cool to see. So David, thank you for the comments on some of your other episodes as well, and for subscribing. We appreciate it. Let's see. We'll pick one or two more here. Somebody made fun of the way we said Alta. I'm not sure how he wrote, this is Ian Kendall 75, Alta.
I think that's how we were saying it. I think we were saying like Alta.
It's pronounced like altitude, Alta. Oh, Alta.
Oh,
Alta, Alta. Okay, I get it now. I actually didn't get it. Altitude, Alta. Alta.
Southern brain.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between pin, and never mind.
A lot of other comments here too. I'll just read off some names to thank you all for doing it. Mitch Key 2176, thank you. Steven 7650.
Oh, I know him.
Do you?
No, I don't know.
Yeah. So we will have one more Salt Lake City episode coming up soon as well. So stay tuned for that. We got a lot of fun other ones coming down the pipe as well. Down the pike.
Yeah, in the pipeline.
In the pipeline. Sure. With all that being
coming
said,
down the turnpike.
Thank you all so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Stay tuned for a lot more, and enjoy the rest of your Transit Tensions Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm saving that dough. Public transit where it's at. Watch me go.